Hi, folks. Well, welcome back to another edition of the Omnist Hour. We're now broadcasting from Jakarta, Indonesia, where I arrived a couple weeks ago, I guess, on my next leg of the adventure of Rob Trump. Been thinking about what we should talk about next, observing world events and generally what's been going on in my world, and thinking about how I might best translate that to something useful for this channel. I decided today we're going to talk maybe a little bit about the darker side of the spiritual journey. By that I mean talking about, well, karma, which is not necessarily a dark thing, but it can be. Talking about the concept of sin and redemption, and those themes of spirituality, of religion, that in many ways lead to some of the more difficult conversations that we have with ourselves and others about the meaning of life. Okay, so let's start out with a quick review of what I've told you about the nature of souls. As I've mentioned, and I'll stand by, everything has a soul. Everything being not just every physical thing, from the smallest particle to entire universes, but everything immaterial as well. So even thoughts have souls, and effectively thoughts are souls. And those souls have, or gradually get, specialties. Not necessarily that that's all they focus on. I mean, a soul has a lot of dimensions and always will. I mean, that's the nature of building a soul from its inception as a blank consciousness, a blank slate of thought, to a very directed set of thoughts that have a particular identity, a particular goal, a particular purpose. So the soul that inhabits an elementary particle has pretty simple thoughts. Maybe, I don't know, depends on the soul. Who knows? Could be that the oldest souls in the universe like to spend a lot of time as an elementary particle without much to think about except whizzing off into space and encountering whatever they're going to encounter next. Who's to say that that's not a particularly valid goal? And depending on what kind of karma you're working from, that might be a pretty comfortable place to be for a long time. So anyway, let's kind of narrow in then on, okay, so we've got many soul vessels, many things, or boundaries within which a soul can incarnate. One of which being what we're familiar with, the human form, but we've talked about many of the other ones as well. Those souls choose those forms given a set of options when they are in the heaven of connection. And the options available, as we discussed in the segment on heaven, are heavily dependent on where that soul is at in their journey, how advanced they've gotten in their journey of consciousness, how much they really understand of the game of souls. The very newborn soul doesn't have a lot of context to work from, and therefore spends a lot of time dealing with a set of choices that are somewhat limited, depending on how they incarnate. Those beginning souls can come into existence in a number of ways. I'm not sure how many we've discussed so far. We'll have to save that for another day, though it may come up in the course of this discussion. Okay, so souls come into existence. They choose incarnations, not completely freely, but within a set of constraints that are consistent with where that soul is at in their journey. And as we've discussed, at most points in the journey, the soul tends to have some guides who are assigned or assign themselves voluntarily. It's a fairly flexible system, as it should be. The guides tend to be souls that have a certain amount of resonance with the other soul, and that's why they choose to focus some of their efforts on guiding these other souls. That resonance can be viewed as something very positive, something that is nurturing, helpful, wants to help those souls along, wants to show them the path that I followed so you can follow in my footsteps and have the same success I've had. And as you might guess, that can also tend towards a little bit darker side of, well, I want other souls to follow this path because that gives me souls to work with to make my job easier, to accomplish my missions in my current incarnation, my current role in the multiverse. And if you really drop back and think about it, we can become very selfish about what we want, even the most advanced souls. This is exactly why you really, really, really don't want an all-powerful God trying to control everything for you. Now, some of you still will say, yes, that's what I want. I want this super being to tell me everything that's right and everything that's wrong so I can never step off the straight and narrow and I can always be perfect. And okay, well, if that's what you think you want, there are certainly souls out there that will be more than happy to pretend to give you what you want. But they're not doing it out of the kindness of their heart. If you look around you, if you look at your civic and spiritual and corporate leaders, they're all human. They all have failings, they all have blind sides, they all have agendas. And that's not only a human failing, it's the characteristic of every soul, no matter what vessel they're in. They have agendas, they have wins, they have fears, and within the confines of whatever level of consciousness they enjoy, those things can manifest, and they can manifest in very ugly ways, consistent with the soul's willingness to self-delude, to rationalize. Okay, so let's drop back now and talk about some of the concepts then. So, from an Omnist point of view, how do we define karma? Knowing that the soul is immortal, the vessels come and go. We can talk mostly in terms of the human vessel because that's the one I think we all understand the best. So, what is karma? When we know the soul is immortal, we're going to live and live and live, choose new lives, choose new challenges, learn new things, forget for a while the things we've learned before so we can make sure that we really learn them. What is this thing called karma? I think that you can come to realize that it's not just a simple, well, they did something wrong, so they're going to pay for it later. That's a very shallow, narrow-minded view of karma. Basically, the way I would describe karma is from the standpoint of making choices. So every second of every day of every life we enjoy, every incarnation we take, we're making choices. How to react to what happens around us, how to react to how we feel, how others feel about us, current events, you name it. Okay, and we don't have absolute control over those events. We can, to some extent, and depending on what choices we're given in the heaven of connection when we choose an incarnation, choose some parameters of our next incarnation. And those parameters generally are more wide, more broad, what we can choose, how we can specialize, the higher level of consciousness that we achieve. So that at the point that you're a God soul, you can pretty much choose all the parameters of your incarnation. Sometimes. Depends on what you're incarnating to do. And that's kind of the crux of the challenge of the game of souls. The lives that we choose most freely are the ones where we're choosing to work on karmic issues. We want to explore dealing better with relationships of different sorts, whether they be romantic, business, etc., 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 spiritual, whatever. And so what, basically what karma is when we make choices, we're sort of flipping a switch, okay? You come to this juncture in your life and you make a choice. You're forced to. Sometimes the choice is I do nothing, and that's still a choice. And in many cases, you don't get a chance to change that choice. If you're at a juncture where a relationship could end or go forward, the wrong choice, or a choice is going to be fairly final. It's going to lead to a divorce. It's going to lead to never seeing a person again. It's going to lead to losing a job, possibly even losing your life. Those are pretty final choices. Especially losing one life. That's a fairly terminal choice. You're going to live again, but you won't get the exact same circumstance to make that choice within again. And so those choices we make and how we feel about them, you can think of, this paradigm of flipping a switch. it's not only flipping a switch in your path, but it's also flipping a switch in the makeup of your self, who you are as a soul, who I am. This thing called the ego, which is not a bad thing like so many people would like to tell you. It's the very nature of being an individual, of being a soul. And I don't know how many ways I have to tell you how harmful that is, to deny your individuality, yourself. It's a choice that some souls are going to make. I know there are plenty of jobs in the multiverse for souls that don't want to face the fact that they're an individual. You know, there are all sorts of jobs out there that don't need individuality. They just want you to follow the rules. Do this, do this, do this. If that's what you want, go ahead. It's just really sad to see so many people so easily willing to give up what makes them a soul. I don't know. If you want to volunteer your existence to something bigger than yourself, I guarantee at the end of that organization that you're devoting yourself to is some very egotistical soul that is using all of you for its own purposes. Maybe just wonderful purposes. You know, there's some master soul that is responsible for making sure there's enough black holes in the universe, sucking up enough matter, doing enough recycling. The cosmic janitor, the ultimate, janitor boss. And, I'm sure that that soul just loves to talk others into the wonder of becoming a black hole for the rest of your existence and sucking up matter and fulfilling the duties of a black hole. Well, whatever the role. That's just one example. Fine, knock yourself out, but don't force it on others, okay? Because that's where the really dark souls come in. And this is where we get to, well, what is sin ultimately? When the soul is immortal? When we're going to get another chance at everything we do in this life? What really is a sin? Some might say, well, nothing's a sin then. Well, I'm going to always have another chance. I can always do it better. Well, that's not true. And that is probably the worst self-deception you can give yourself. Because by making a choice to do something, by saying, well, it doesn't matter, I can do whatever I want, I'll always get another chance, you are telling the multiverse something about yourself, a very important piece of information it's not going to forget easily. That you have not learned to take responsibility. You've not learned to take ownership for your choices. You think it's all a big lark, a big game, you can do whatever you want? Well, this is true to a point. But let me tell you, you are telling the multiverse that you are not suited for a path that has a lot of latitude in it. And when you live these dark lives, making evil choices because you can, knowing that you're hurting others, you're taking their freedoms away from them, you're taking their lives away from them when they didn't want you to, that you are setting a path for yourself. Now, it's not cast in concrete, and many souls repent from what they've done and have done and have redeemed themselves for those dark acts. And everybody does it. I mean, it's This is why all souls reincarnate, even the most experienced ones. Even God himself has to be reminded, that nobody gets to be God, or should ever get to be all-powerful, all-knowing, all-seeing. It's not healthy. I mean, the most true truism that I've ever heard is power corrupts. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's not just true of humans. That's true of souls. Yes, there are gods out there that are still seeking absolute power and think they know better than the first soul how to run the multiverse. And they're going to keep scrambling around trying to gain power, and that's fine. They're teaching themselves, and they perform a very dark duty of creating this negative pressure on the multiverse to evolve. And if you've learned nothing about evolution through any study of science, you know that evolution only happens in the presence of pressure. And pressure to change. If there's no pressure, there's no reason to change, and things stagnate. Well, some might say, well, that would be good. We'll have peace. Let's just get to the point where there's no pressure on anybody. This is peace, right? Oh, love, peace, harmony. We're going to be in perfection then. No. You don't get it, because that may be a localized thing that is on one planet. We've wiped every other species out, and ours is the only one, and everybody thinks like us, and everybody does like us, and we've got a perfect system that never changes, always has just enough food for everybody, or for the people that, or the entities that are felt to be important enough to deserve food. But there's always going to be something else out there. The multiverse is huge. It's not just one planet. It's not just one solar system. It's not just one galaxy. It's not just one universe. It's not just one heaven. It's got dimensions upon dimensions upon dimensions of different agendas going on. Different viewpoints of what it means to create, to be, to continue. And the one you're seeing from the human experience is only the smallest. Well, there's smaller ones, I'm sure, but you know, it's a very focused viewport on what's going on. And if you think for one split second that it's possible that humanity is going to solve all its problems and have absolute perfect peace, and everybody's going to be kumbaya, you're fucking insane. And I don't mind telling you, you are an idiot if you think like that. What's worse is that other souls will use you for that idiocy. Because you know what? Useful idiots are great at taking on karma. And that's what the tricky dark souls do. They get idiots like you taking on their karma, doing all the dark stuff that they need done, sitting back and saying, well, I'm just doing my job. They're just doing their job. We're just being our own little part of creation. Yes, Yes, there are a lot of souls like that. Just like there are in the corporate world. You deal with them every day, and you despise them, unless you're one of them. And even if you're one of them, you despise the others that are like that because you don't see that you're like that. You just see other people who are behaving like you, and because of your mindset, you think they're the evil ones. So let's circle back around then. What does this mean in real terms? We're constantly taking on karma. You can't avoid it. Some religious sects have tried. The Jains will avoid stepping on any insect for fear that they're going to take on karma. Manichaeans, their leaders, refuse to do any work, refuse to raise crops. They insist on being served by their flock so that they can maintain their purity. This is the kind of idiocy that people do when avoiding karma becomes their goal. It's absurd. It's insane. It's one of the darkest things you can do. The truth is that we're constantly making decisions that we're going to regret. It's part of being a soul. It's part of the game. That doesn't mean that you don't try not to do things that you know you're going to regret. Everybody understands karma at that gut level of, I won't want to do something that I'm going to have to pay for, or pay more than I am willing to belly up to. And a lot of what we do, a lot of what we believe, our ideologies, our religions, and so forth, are chosen because they give us a comfortable way of pretending like our decisions are the best. Oh, well, see, in the Bible it says this and this and this, therefore, if I do this, I'm good. In the Quran, in the Communist Manifesto, in, I don't know, Newton's Principia. You can rationalize your decisions in a lot of different ways. Ultimately, you're going to pay for what you're going to pay for. You're going to be the soul that you program yourself to be. That's the gift of free will. That's the gift of this system that the first soul, God, in his infinite wisdom, decided to institute for all of us souls. And you can argue till you're blue in the face about whether that's the right system. It is the system. It's what you're going to deal with, whether you like it or not. I mean, it's like you can rail against it, you can pretend it doesn't exist, but I'm telling you, this is how things work. Deal with it. And the best advice I can give you is to make decisions consciously, knowing that they might have negative consequences, but also knowing that making no decision can have as large consequences, and that the decisions you make are not necessarily all personal. You can't live life in a bubble and pretend like, well, I'm just little old Rob here and sitting in Jakarta, Indonesia. Nothing I could do or say is going to make a difference for what's going on in the world. So I'll just bury my head in the sand and disconnect from politics, disconnect from world issues, and just, do my own thing so I can get to my own enlightenment and be one. I mean, that decision which is a decision, it's the choice you can make. It's going to be restricting your opportunities in future lives. The multiverse is going to see a very self-centered person who is able to shut out the pain, the conflict, the challenges of the world, ignore what's going on around them. Just not my problem, not my problem. And that's going to tell the multiverse a lot about you, about your capabilities, about where you belong in the grand scheme of things. And it's going to set a path of guidance for your soul that will lead to a certain limited set of roles, much more limited than probably will be available to somebody who is more outgoing, more vulnerable, more open to active participation in what's going on around them. So what I'm hoping that you'll get out of this is a little sense of humility and a little sense of, you know what? You can pay me now, pay me later. You're going to have to deal with these things. You could ignore them, but you do so at your peril. You get through a life of, oh, I've managed to distance myself from everything. I'm in nirvana. Oh, I am so enlightened. I am so wonderful. I don't need it. Oh, I just radiate energy. Okay, maybe you are doing that. And maybe you feel that is, in fact, your role in this incarnation. And that's absolutely okay. I can't speak for you in that. That may be what turns your crank. I can tell you that if you're telling other souls that that is the path, that is the way, that is how you're supposed to live your life if you want to advance spiritually, that you're a charlatan. That you are actively subverting other people's opportunities to grow and excel. Even if they voluntarily come to you and they want you to service them in this way, you're a spiritual prostitute. No great teacher wants to keep their students forever or establish a never-ending school of this is the truth. If you are that kind of person, that kind of a teacher, you are an evil teacher. You are forcing a very narrow viewpoint onto other souls. And that ultimately is the greatest sin. The greatest sin you can ever commit. And it's a sin we commit all the time. And it's a sin that is actually quite useful. Because the multiverse needs policemen. It needs taskmasters, slave masters. Doesn't like them, but the multiverse is a big place. It's got a lot of, I can't really call it mass, but a lot of substance to it. And a lot of that substance takes effort to maintain. Like ask anybody who manages an apartment building. You can't just leave it. You're constantly repairing stuff, replacing stuff, customer complaints, etc., etc. And a large fraction of the multiverse is like that. And if that's what you're good at, knock yourself out. By God, there's a place for you. But don't claim that nobody warned you, that that's not what you really wanted to do with your incarnations. I'm sorry. I really wanted to be an artist, a dancer, a singer. You show the multiverse what you're capable of with every choice you make. You're not going to convince anybody that you were poorly treated, that you were misunderstood. That's human bullshit. That doesn't fly this far in the heaven of connection. That's why the heaven of connection exists. It's not the simple place that everybody knows everything that these, low-level oneness cultists think it is. But it is a place where you can't really hide a lot. At least not from other souls at your level or higher. And I guarantee that the vast majority of human incarnated souls are not at a very high level. It's not your fault. You're young souls. It's like, do you think any soul would be created and then immediately elevated to godhood? What kind of idiot would set up a system like that? That's communism, right? Oh, if you can become party leader through whatever backstabbing or dirty dealing, you must be the best person around. The spirit world doesn't work like that. That's communist idiocy. That's the lunacy of the Hitlers and the Stalins and the Maos and the Xis and these sociopathic idiots who are in charge of global multinational corporations, frankly, a lot of them. I'm probably being a little bit too harsh on many of them. But the truth is that they're the people who get into positions of mass power, and that increasingly in modern age is the people who are in charge of large corporations, especially since corporations are far less accountable to anybody than governments. They're in places where they're getting opportunities to do some very dark things. And if those poor souls want to have any hope of a role in the cosmos more than being the hated CEOs of black hole operations, they better get their act together. And I mean, the best thing you guys could do is to self-dissociate. If the governments of the world are not going to demonopolize you, demonopolize yourselves. Delegate. Instead of trying to consolidate everything so you make all the decisions and you have absolute control over everything, you're going to drive yourselves crazy doing that. Don't try to be God, because God didn't do that. That's not the way God works. That's not the way any sane soul would deal with power. There are really good models of organization that folks have come up with. One of the best was the United States Constitution. Yeah, it's flawed, but I mean, the ideas are sound. These folks had a deep-seated appreciation for good and bad in government. The risks, the opportunities, the temptations. They could see it all around them. The Constitutional Congress, I wish we had transcripts or a tape of the proceedings. It would be pretty comical, because what you would see is a handful of really bright people trying to guide a bunch of really stupid, low-level souls into trying to create a relatively healthy government with enough checks and balances so that it could hope to survive the ambitions of the low-level souls that were trying, that thought they knew everything, that thought, oh, if only I had all the power, if only my state was the preeminent one. If I want to be the president, I want to be the king, I want to be... The ambitious people are not the ones, they're not the sharpest tools in the shed. They're the ones that don't even know the kind of karma they're creating. They don't even know what karma is. They have no concept of an afterlife. They have no concept of responsibility. They just know what they want. This is a one-dimensional soul that thinks from the point of view that anything is good for me must be good for everybody. This is one-dimensional thinking. This is the lowest level of consciousness. The next level of consciousness is the dualist, the one that says, well, I know what I want and I know what they want, but I'm right. What I want is better, so I'm going to fight them, and make them obey me or kill them. That's duality. That's level 2 on the consciousness scale. Okay? That's like amoeba level consciousness. Even if it's in a human body, you're still thinking like an amoeba. And the next step up is saying, well, I can see there's two sides here. Maybe we can compromise. Maybe we can work out something where everybody gets a little bit of what they want. Nobody gets everything, and we try to maintain some kind of balance of power. That's third level consciousness. That's starting to understand that absolutes of religion, of ideology, of politics, or whatever are all bad. It doesn't matter who wins. If you have a winner, if somebody's going to be able to lord it over everybody else, you're going to have a bad system. It's not going to work. Might be okay for one lifetime or 2 lifetimes, but eventually the grand poobah leader is going to have a kid, or is going to have a successor that is going to be a Hitler, a Stalin, a Caligula. And the only hope for long-term stability, success for most people is going to be some kind of a balance. The more dimensions you can add to that balance, the healthier it will be. And that's where you start getting to the higher level of consciousness. At some point you realize that you can't focus on one lifetime, one incarnation, that somehow you have to do something that is going to work, that is going to encompass the idea of the immortality of the soul, and add some kind of a soulful element to your governance of things, to your understanding of the human condition. And that's the level at which souls realize that religion is not necessarily a bad thing. That you need to have some kind of a framework of belief in something bigger than yourself in order to anchor your society in a set of healthy values for that culture. what we've seen in the last 100 years, since the invention of commercialism, since the invention of communism, since the concerted effort of well-intentioned intellectuals to destroy the old religious valued system, is a vacuum created into which the souls who don't appreciate the value of religion making all the decisions. And it's not been a improvement. You can't look at the world around you and say that it's a better place for having convinced half of the humans on it that religion is something evil. And that's pretty much what half the people on this planet are thinking right now. That, oh, if only we hadn't had Christianity, the world would be perfect. Oh, if only we hadn't had Islam, the world would be perfect. If only everybody was a communist, the world would be perfect. If only everyone did whatever they tell you to do on TV, bought the product that they want you to, take the job that they tell you to, everybody fell into their place in the human machine as a good little consumer, a good little producer, good little citizen of the world. This is the mindset that's being spread right now. And it's evil. It's stupid. We've got to stop listening to these people. They're not the sharpest tools in the shed. It would be wonderful if we could come up with a world government that functioned, that managed to do a good job of preventing wars, keeping states from taking advantage of each other or taking advantage of their own people. Are we anywhere close to that now? Look at the world. We've got horrible atrocities going on in this world that are being covered up, actively covered up, because nobody wants the world to see just how screwed up our elites are, the ones who control media, either state media in the case of China or corporate media. It's the same thing. The same kind of very low level souls who are controlling those narratives. They're not the sharpest tools in the set. They're sharp in the sense that they can do a lot of damage because they have no conscience. They don't get it. I mean, they're operating at this one-dimensional, two-dimensional level of thinking in what they're doing. And it makes them dangerous. It makes them dangerous because they don't think of the consequences when they choose to do something. These are people who would absolutely push a button and destroy 1 million people if it fit their agenda. Oh, the world has too many people. The population is too high. The only way that we're going to survive is by reducing it. They would do that. That's what happens when people play God. That's why God does not even play God. And we've got to understand that. You can't set up human society in conflict with the divine. And the divine does not work that way. There is no supreme being. The first soul is just another soul. Very experienced, very influential. And from that fact, maybe has a lot of power and has managed to direct a lot of the decisions of creation. You don't want to let anybody bump off the old man. You don't want to You don't want to have what you think you want to have. Your big buddy in the sky, or this supreme galactic consciousness that we're all part of. It's crap. It's bullshit. Ask any scientist that knows anything about how to organize a computing system. You don't put all the eggs in one processor, because if that thing fails, the whole system dies. Distributed processing is where it's at, where it's always been at. As soon as we stop trying to concentrate power into one set of hands, one party, one country, one world, the better off we'll all be. Start thinking like God, not like gods. Anyway, I hope that was useful. And like, share, subscribe, cuss, moan, whatever. Interact in any way you choose with the Omnist Hour, and we'll see you next time. Take care.